Elle. Elle Johnson.
Hello. Hi.
I'm giddy. I'm giddy that one that you said yes you would come on. Actually, like DaJuan, where have you been? I said yes, so why haven't you gotten back in touch with me? And it means so much to me. How are you?
I'm doing well. I am surviving, thriving, coping, doing all those things that we are figuring out that we can do to get through this. So,
Yeah. But that's just like one day, right? And that's all.
yeah, yes. That's in a 24-hour period that feels like 10 years.
Yeah, it
And
does.
sometimes feels like 2 minutes.
It
You
does.
never know.
The emotional roller coaster is for real.
Yeah.
And before we hit record, I was just telling you that I've just felt like I've been up and down too. So
Yeah.
it's I don't want to say misery loves company. I feel a camaraderie.
Well, we all need community, right?
Yeah.
So that's the key, realizing how much we need each other, which is great.
Yes, 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 yes. All right, I'm gonna kick this off with a hard hitting question. I like to
Okay.
just throw it out there. Um, Me or Michael B. Jordan? Wow.
Wow.
I
That
mean,
is that is a hard-hitting
that's
question.
not the question. That's not the question. But I
Okay.
just wanted to
Thank
see your
God.
face.
Thank goodness.
I know. I know. A little bit more like New York or LA. New York or LA.
Ooh, that is a great question because
Yes.
I will tell you, I'm a New Yorker born and raised, but I've always wanted to be in LA.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm now an Angelino, an honorary Angelino. I'm not one of these New Yorkers who hates LA, who can't get over the fact that the pizza and the bagels are not the same. I'm totally I am down with LA and I love LA and it is my city. So I'm
Yeah.
all about LA. Yeah.
It's good because I had when I was looking you up, I had read that you were like I knew I had to be in LA, and so you came out pretty early on and got out here. So I just didn't know if you were one of those secret transplants that were like, I can't wait to get back to New York.
Oh no, not at all. And in fact, it took me a long time to get out here just because LA can seem so daunting, especially for a New Yorker who didn't learn to drive until she was 21 years old. The idea of having a car and car insurance was really terrifying to me. So I had to get over that mental hurdle. And then once I got here, I was like, oh, this is my city. I'm never leaving.
It's so funny you say that because when I first started acting, I remember a lot of the actors used to have like driver license from New York on their special skills, and I was like, why do you have that as like? Did you turn 16 in New York and get a car? But that was not the
Right.
case.
Yeah, that is not the case for New Yorkers. You're on public transportation, which is fabulous.
Yeah.
But I fortunately really love to drive. And so it's great to be driving out here in LA.
Okay. All right. All right. All right. That's acceptable. That's acceptable. All right. So for the people out there, for me, myself, let's break this down. I don't want to say it in a passing by way that like a flippant way, I should say, that people throw out the word producer on everything, right? But I just want to get the EP versus showrunner versus writers who are producers on things. Like, can you break that down? Because you've held all those titles and you still hold
Yes.
them. And I just want to
Yeah.
see if you can break it down for us.
Well, I mean, generally in television, when you see the producer credits, those are writers on the show. Unless you're like a line producer, or yes, you do have non-writing executive producers. But in general, the hierarchy for writer producers on shows just show kind of how long you've either been on the show or your experience level in terms of how many shows you've worked on, which doesn't necessarily translate into your skills on that show that you are currently working on. You can have someone who's a supervising producer who may be more adept at the show than even a co-executive producer.
Yeah.
But so as you get higher up the titles, it's co-producer, producer, supervising producer, co-executive producer, and then executive producer, and then showrunners on top of all of that. And the showrunner is usually an executive producer as well. But generally, it's just a way of kind of identifying somebody's experience level within the industry and experience on that particular show. And, you know, you can be an executive producer and not be the showrunner. That just means that you're a senior writer. You might be a number two, somebody who's kind of the right-hand person to the showrunner, helping to run the room, helping to keep things moving when the showrunner is either on set or dealing with other production issues. You need somebody in the room to keep the room going. And that's usually an EP, sometimes a co-EP, but somebody with a great deal of experience who knows how to keep on schedule, and how to break story. Basically, It's all about breaking story and keeping the writer's room going.
Okay, so I'm going from top to bottom here. So it's like showrunner, then we have, it could be EP or it could be co-EPs in there. Right?
Yeah, there's usually an EP, an executive producer, and a co-EP. A supervising producer, or you also get consulting producer. And a consulting producer is a title usually given to somebody who is at an executive producer level, but they may be developing or working on other projects. So they have a limited amount of time to work on the show that they're staffed on. So they're more consulting versus being there, you know, as full time. In other words, they have other priorities. They might be leaving because they have development, but they wanted to work on that show.
Yeah.
And then you have a producer, a co-producer, and then you get into, and I don't think we use the term anymore, the baby writers. You know, the
I never heard it.
That used to be how you would refer to like an executive story editor, a story editor, or a staff writer. I mean, a staff writer is, you know, generally that's your entry level writer into the writer's room. And that's hence the name baby writers, which I think we're not doing that anymore.
Yeah. I don't think we're saying that anymore.
I know. Okay. Sorry. I got the memo. I just have to incorporate it into my lingo.
Yeah. It's just interesting because I think, you know, from the actor's point of view or from our side, you know, everybody matters, of course, but when you're walking into a room, like a audition room or on sets, you're like, everybody matters, but you're like, okay, that's the writer, but that's also a producer. And I always try to get it like, what does everybody do without offending anybody by asking that, you know?
Right. Well, you know, it's interesting because you, as I said, you never know who actually kind of wields what kind of power in the writer's room. As I said, you might have a lower level writer who really gets the show and has a lot of influence over what happens on the show versus an executive producer. And a perfect example of that is on Bosh, where you know, when I joined the show, I think in season 3, and I think I joined. Yeah. That's the Pierce season.
It is.
We'll have to talk about that.
We definitely will.
But when I joined, I think I started as a co-EP, but there was a lower level writer named Tom Bernardo.
Yes.
Who I think was just a producer.
I think he was a staff writer, was it? I mean, not staff. He was in that writing something.
Yeah, I think he was a staff writer before I started there.
Okay, right.
But you know, Tom was really the on-set writer. He really understood the show. He had great relationships with the showrunner Eric Overmyer and with Michael Connolly and with Titus. So he was, you know, instrumental in a lot of things in terms of breaking story, in terms of understanding what was needed on set. And when he was on set, he understood what was happening in the writer's room. So, you know, if you went on a set and you saw me with my co-EP title and decided, I'm not going to bother with Tom Bernardo, you would have been sadly mistaken.
It would have been not a good move.
That would have been wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think everybody, again, like I started, what I gathered quickly was treat everybody with kindness. Like everybody matters. You know, I used to go onto sets and be afraid to talk to certain people because I just not like, well, you just don't know. Are you allowed to talk to? And I think as we started to work, like you're just like, everybody's chill. They're all trying to get the same thing done. Make a great story, make a great series. And so that changed even on when I went into guest on different shows. you know,
Yeah,
and
I'll bet.
you just say hi. When the showrunner walked up to me in NCIS, he was just like, thank you for being here. I was like, yeah, we just would talk. Before, I would have been a little bit nervous because I didn't understand, like,
Right.
I don't want to say
The hierarchy.
hierarchy. Yeah, but that is the
But it
word,
is a
right?
hierarchy. Yeah.
Yeah, but everybody is there to serve the story. And I really love that. When we talk about casting, Elle, like, where does that fall in this? You know, if we're using Bosch, like it's, I know Bosch is a little bit different because I know the directors didn't help with the casting, but more the producers did, right? But where does that fall for EPs and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, generally, in most of the shows that I've been on, the writer of the episode, regardless of your level, has been involved with the casting.
Okay.
That used to be, and I don't know, things have shifted a lot, especially during COVID. And Bosch was a little bit different. I think that in that generally it was the showrunner and executive producers who would be involved in the casting. So like Eric Overmeyer and Michael Connolly. And they may send tape or, send footage to the writer of the episode and ask for an opinion. But in general, they were the ones who were casting it. And usually the director is obviously involved because they're the ones who are going to have to work with an actor and get a performance out of an actor. So they have to feel comfortable that they can do that and that it's a relationship that's going to work. But I think Bosch was unusual in that it really felt like it was coming more from the executive producers and showrunners.
Yeah. It must have been a little bit nerve-wracking for a director to come on, because 50% of your cast was already the series cast, or 60,
right.
You know what I mean? So,
well, that's what makes it so different in television, because the directors are more of the guests than anyone, because especially if you're talking about recurring characters and roles that are going to repeat, the showrunners and the writers want to make sure they've gotten the right person and somebody who's going to be good for the role, versus just somebody who that director wants to work with and thinks is right for their particular episode. So
okay, all right. So for that piece, then everybody matters. We'll just say
everybody matters.
Everybody matters. And when we get back into the rooms, remember that, or when you're back on sets and stuff like that. But so you've been in this business for 20 plus years now. Can we say
yes, like 23 years, I think. Yeah.
20, and I bet you've seen a lot of, I hate this word sometimes, but like what actors have that maybe I want to say newer actors need a little bit more of. I wonder if you could boil that down to, we're just going to layman terms it, like the and need more of. What do you think that is?
Wow. Well, it's interesting because I think when you're talking about the it factor, so many times that is something that you can't learn and you can't teach. You either have it or you don't, in terms of a performance, in terms of a performer who kind of draws your eye and holds your attention in a way that is unexpected. I don't know. And, maybe this is a function of me not being an actor, but I don't know how you learn that. I think you either have it or you don't. But I do think, to be more useful in answering that question, I think two of the things that would help actors is listening, like really listening, not only to what the direction is, but also listening to who you're performing opposite, like just really hearing what's being said instead of waiting to say your line. Being present and being there in the performance, I think, goes a long way.
Yeah. When I work with actors in some of my courses, I try to get them to understand that it's not about getting it right. Right. I mean, you definitely want to say the words that the writer had put on the page. Right. And I want to come back to that in just a second.
Okay.
But you definitely do want to say that. But it's really about leaping off of the page. It's really about like giving me your point of view, like all of that. And so many people have gotten away from that. They just want to get it right. I just want to make sure whatever they want, I want to be this.
And there is no right, honestly.
Say it again, Elle. Say it again,
there,
Elle.
there is no right. There is
Yes.
no right, because I'm looking for a performance that's going to surprise me, that's going to, as you say, leap off the page.
Yeah.
I love it when an actor comes in and does something with the scene that I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was there.
Mhm.
Or they make a choice. I love for actors to make choices, because that's so key to me getting a sense of their willingness to be fearless or to try things. And you really want to, and I know it's tough when you're in a room, just reading, it's hard to convey all of these things, but I think it's really important to maybe be a little bit more fearless, and make choices, make bold choices, and then give us the opportunity to correct them if it's too far out, and direct you and pull you back. But make a choice, show us something. And I think that's really key, because the truth is, going back to the idea that, you won't get it perfect, there's so many other factors that play into why somebody gets cast. I mean, that you really, as an actor and performer, have no control over. It could be, oh, well, they look too similar to someone we cast in another role, or there won't be, we want something else standing next to this other regular character that we have. There are just so many other factors that go into this decision that are really out of your control. And, I always feel like you want to say to the actors as they're leaving, like, don't sweat this. Like, you did a good job. There's so many other factors. Don't feel like, oh, you don't have the talent or you're not doing a good job. You probably are. It's just, we're looking for something that is contingent on a million other different things.
I gotta take a pause on that one, because I have tried to move home after many auditions. I'm like, well, it's not gonna work. Like, it must mean I'm not a great actor, when we have seen, from being on the Bosh for such a long time, you see, oh, this person who auditioned for the pilot is now back for season 4 and now doing, Jackie would tell me, she's like, I auditioned for this role, and it's like, it was just not the fit. Do you know what I mean? It's so, but we don't get that as actors. Like, I think it's so personal to us. So to hear you say on the way out, think to yourself, don't sweat this. That's a golden nugget there.
Oh, good. Because I know what you guys are doing is so tough. You're the front lines. The writers may write the words and we feel proprietary over the characters and the story, but at the end of the day, it's your face that's out there. And unlike writers, we get to fail in private. We can delete, we can throw out, we don't have to show stuff. When you guys are making mistakes, you're making it in front of a whole crew, and so that is an added pressure. And, I think everybody knows that how difficult it is. Everyone may think it's easy, from a distance. Like, I have a friend who likes to say it, everybody thinks they can write because they know the alphabet. And I think the same is true for acting. People think, oh, I could do that. And then you get a camera on you and you realize you can't. Like, there's so much craft to it. So the audition process it can be so humbling and mortifying, but you just have to know that there's no perfect performance. There are just different performances. Yeah. And it's a matter of putting those puzzle pieces together to get what you think you want. And even then, you don't really know what you want until you start editing it. It changes all the time.
It's so, I just want to say this again. People think they could write because they know the alphabet. Come on, that was golden.
I can't take credit for that. That's a writer named Mark Israel who said that. And I thought, oh my God, I love that. I'm going to have to use that. Yeah. Used well, and credit given.
I just want to say real quick, side tangent. I remember on set when I would talk to Tom Bernardo, and he knows that I coach actors and I work with him and Think Bigger Coaching. And he said, what I want you to tell them is know your lines. Stop coming and thinking you don't know. So let's just clarify this right now. There's a lot of people saying that you don't have to know your lines. And when you get on set, and look at your face.
Saying that.
There's acting, I'm not going to call anybody out, but like, it's like, the lines, you could be loosey goosey on set. And I was like, I'm going to tell you all, from 7 seasons, one of the worst feelings is having scripty come up to you more than once after your take and saying, DaJuan, you said the instead of a. And I'm like, it's a definite art. You know what I mean? They're like,
right.
We need it to this because it leads to this. And I just want to hear your take on it so we can move.
Yeah. Well, the script, I know some people would like to think it's a suggestion, or just it's not a suggestion. It really, we've toiled and struggled over every word, and every word is there for a reason. And we would like you to say those words. And it's interesting. I know, I always liken it to, okay, you have a song, and you've heard it played on the radio, or you've heard it played a certain way. It has a certain arrangement, and there can be other arrangements of a song, but I want to hear this arrangement. So give me the arrangement that I've written. That's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear a different arrangement. I want to hear it the way, it's written. But I do understand that people have, you're embodying a character, and so you have a take on things, and you have things that will make you feel more comfortable or help you get into the character. I totally understand that, but you have to understand you're part of a whole, and there's a reason for things being written the way they are generally. So
we said one thing Tom was talking about one time. Somebody said, I'm just going to make this up, gray Honda, but we had a gold, right? And it was like that one little word that messed up episode 8 or something like that, because the car is different. And so, and I know you know this more than I know this now, that there are people who are watching our series that are like fine tooth combing it, and they're like, well, was it this? And so we try to get it accurate, right? We try to get it accurate. I'm off on a tangent, I'm sorry.
No, definitely we try to. I think that's key. It's not, so yes, know your lines. It just makes everything go more smoothly.
Okay. I think I'm being called to ask for some reason. I just want to say, I want to talk about self-tapes, but I really also have been this message came to me is like, Self-Made was so good.
Oh, thank you.
It was so good. If you have not seen it, it's on Netflix. And you were co-showrunner on it. Make sure I say that right.
Yes. Yeah, I was co-show running.
Yeah.
And Self-Made, inspired by the life of Madam C.J. Walker. It's a project the many, many, many years in the making that I was lucky enough to be brought on board to co-showrun with a fabulous showrunner and creator named Janine Sherman-Barrois. And it was created by a woman named Nicole Jefferson Asher, based on a book by Alelia Bundles. And it was just one of those passion projects that I really wanted to do. And I was fortunate enough that, the folks at Bosh let me kind of split a season beyond for half a season so that I could go and work on this other show that I really wanted to take part in. So, but thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. It was really a wonderful, I'm so glad that I got to be part of that experience.
I remember you tweeted something that still gives me chills when you were looking at everybody. And I'm not saying it wasn't you, but I just remember this tweet came from your account. And you said something to the effect of, looking at everybody, you're like, we're looking at our ancestors. And I thought, was that you, or was it?
That was me. I was on set with our director, Demaine Davis, and we had all of these, Black actors of various ages in period costume. And I just had an overwhelming sense of like being back in time, and like these people were representing our ancestors. And it was really moving to me, because, we don't often get to see ourselves depicted in certain ways. It's for a long time, it was usually like you're either in slavery or you're in the civil rights movement, and you don't get to see anything in between. And so it was lovely to kind of see the breadth and scope of Black people in America. It was really cool.
Yeah, I loved it. That's Self-Made, Netflix. It's great. Thank
you.
It really is. Side note again, I I'm done with slavery movies. I think I've seen them.
It's tough. It's tough. Like the
right?
trauma to only be experiencing the trauma when we have so many other stories to tell, so many other experiences. And that's one of the things that I feel like we're in a moment now, having written cop shows most of my career, getting to see characters, Black characters in cop shows get expanded roles and really just get into the lives of these characters in a way that we haven't before, which I'm going to segue on you.
Do it.
It's a perfect segue into Pierce's character and the origins of the Merce.
I love it. I love the Merce.
The Merce, it's funny.
Hang on, Elle. Hang on real quick. If everybody doesn't know what we're talking about, if you haven't seen Bosh, Pierce is the character I play on Bosh. And season 3, I got upped to detective, and I acquired a Merce from my wife on the show, and the origin of it was from Elle. Right? Like you.
Yeah.
Where did it come from? I don't know.
Well, we have a writer's room, obviously, and we're all just sitting in the writer's room talking about the characters and who they are and just trying to come up with moments for them as we figure out not only the plot of the case that we're trying to solve, but who these people are and what's happening in their personal lives. And I just love the idea that Pierce would have this bag because he was a new detective, that his wife had given it to him, and that, it was kind of a symbol of this family man. That's a man who has something larger in his life. He's got a relationship that he's dedicated to, but clearly, this is somebody who is on board with his journey, becoming a detective and, rising up through the ranks, and that this bag would just kind of be like the physical embodiment of that relationship and who this man was. That this was a man who was grounded, had a great relationship, and strong enough in and of himself to carry a Merce to work. To me, it just said so much about who he was. Yeah. And I had not had an opportunity to work with you at that point because I was new to the show. But, talking about actors and how you get a job, I mean, I didn't know who you were, but I knew that all of the writers and executive producers were impressed by you, impressed by your work ethic, impressed by your talent, impressed with how you carried yourself on set, enough to know that they wanted you around, that from what they had seen before, that they wanted to have more of you, that you would be an asset, and that you would be able to not only play the character, but fit in well with the vibe on set. And so everybody just loved you as a person and wanted to see Pierce be around. So, knowing that and the kind of love that people had for that character who we only really saw glimpses of, I was like, okay, let's build this out into something more.
Yeah. So if anybody's out there wondering, we just shot our 7th season and it's going to be coming out on June 25th. Make sure you check that out. But if anybody's wondering, I did get to keep the Merce.
Oh my God.
I did. I'm going to tell you, I was gunning for it. I was gunning for the Merce, and I have it. We just moved, so it's packed away. But one of the things that, I think as actors, we have to do is the writers give you such an amazing deep foundation, but you got to take it deeper, right? You got to. And so one of my grounding just nuggets for me was the Merce, but it also meant so much more. It meant that I called myself the Boy Scout, right? And it really meant nobody ever told me that I was the moral compass of the show, but I just for me, it all stemmed from that season 3. Like, let's go back to season 1 and make sure we remember all this stuff. But then also, how do we expand this for myself too? So the Merce really helped, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and that carried through, obviously, because I think it was it season 5? Is that when we had that day where we're out near Angel's Flight and you're having to look for the season 4? That's right, looking for the bullet. And, the whole, even in breaking that story, what you brought to the character, this idea of the Boy Scout, the man who's going to be so thorough, that influenced the types of scenes that we were doing. Because we thought, oh, well, if anyone's going to be out there looking for the bullet, it's going to be Pierce. Like he's going to go with all of the tools, and figure it out and find it, because he's the one who does the right thing and just doggedly never gives up, relentless.
Yeah, a dog with a bone. A dog with a bone. So, all right. Well, June 25th, everybody. June 25th.
Yeah.
Before we leave the acting world, because I want to talk to you a little bit about writing, self-tapes are all the buzz right now. They're the biggest things. And I'm just wondering, from a co-showrunner, showrunner, executive producer, you're seeing a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
So just tell us, what really is your preference right now? To be in the room or to get a tape? Like where is this landing with you?
I'll tell you, I mean, I love when someone does a self-tape. I love that somebody, gets out there and puts themselves on tape. I think that's amazing and great. And I don't think to me, it doesn't work against you at all. What it does though, and this is, I think, the advantage that you have for being in the room, is I can't fast forward through you when you're in the room, but I can fast forward through you if I'm watching you. And sometimes you see a performance or you see a performer and you're like, that person's not right. And immediately, and the inclination is to just fast forward through it or to not watch all of it, because you feel like, okay, I don't think this person's it. Whereas if you're in the room, I have to pay attention. You have many more opportunities, because I'm not, going to throw you out of the room. I'm going to let you go through the whole thing, even though there are instances where someone comes in and, within a few lines, you're like, they're not quite getting it. But then maybe by the end, you turn it around, or you realize, oh, I can give this person a note. So I think from my perspective, the tapes are easier because it's more efficient. I can do it on my own schedule. I can watch them anywhere. I can fast forward. But from the actor's perspective, I'm a captive audience when you're right in front of me. And so there may be opportunities to get a note or adjust, or, if you can read our body language and feel like, oh, they weren't feeling that, let me ask if I can do it again, or if they'll give me a note. So that
it's a split decision.
Yeah, there. It really is. Yeah.
Okay. I never thought about it that way, in the sense of you could turn it around by the end, because I feel like we get that by that time. I mean, we're still in it. I'm going to give my best performance, but by that time, usually getting the, well, thank you. You know what I mean? Because,
but you know what? Sometimes sometimes the moment doesn't come until the end of the scene. Mm-hmm. So even if at the top of the scene, if you're busy, getting into the character, doing whatever business you have planned, by the time you get to that moment that we're waiting to see if you can play it, if you haven't impressed us at the top, but you get that moment, it might be like, oh, let's have them do it over. Like maybe they can pull back or be more at the top.
Yeah.
But usually a scene, the way scenes are constructed, like a script, a beginning, middle, and end, they're usually building to something. So you're not usually coming in hot and cooling, unless that's the trajectory of it. In other words, you're building to something.
There's an arc.
There's an arc. Yeah. There's some moment that you're building towards, and it's not usually right at the top. So you can turn it around by the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Note to self: go hard on my self tapes. So you're right. Okay, so you're right. You've always wanted to be a writer. I read, right? Like there's no world that you're gonna like maybe direct a little bit.
Oh no, I'm not that person. No, I have no interest in directing. I love the writing process. I love the process of writing, which is fortunate because a lot of times that's all you get, the process, those moments once you're finally out of the writer's room, you've broken the story with the other writers and you get to write the outline, and then you sit down and get to write the script and really dig in and figure out the moments and who the characters are and just putting the whole thing together. To me, that's the best part of it. It's almost the filming of it, by the time I get to that, I'm almost like, I've already done this. Like I have already acted out, performed, thought of, imagined every permutation of this scene. And so now it's just, to me, it's like, okay, somebody else has to get this down on film, because I've already experienced this fully. So it's a little different for me at that point. That's why it's easier to like kind of put the producer hat on when you're on set, and be looking at other things, still, concerned with honoring the script and making sure you're getting the performance that you need. But yeah, I'm a writer.
Okay. And this might be a silly question for you, but is it just easy for you now? Like,
no.
I mean, 23 years.
It's never easy. It's never easy. And that's probably why I still love writing so much, because I've never gotten good at it. I mean, it just is never. It's never easy. Every project is different. Every product is so different. What do you mean you
never got good at it, Elle? Come on.
Every time I start something, I'm like, oh my God, I don't think I can do this. Like, this is, I feel, and maybe that's just because I'm trying to pick projects that will stretch me. I try to always do something that's going to be different, and that will be a challenge where I can learn something new or write something different. And because I generally have written cop shows, I've written on a lot of character-driven shows, but cop shows have tended to be my thing, and procedurals. When I've gotten to a point I've been on shows where I realized, like, oh, this is my third time writing a death row scene. Like, I've done this before. And so, to me, it's like, make a mental note to not do that again. You've done it. Like, or how do you do it differently? So, because in cop shows, there's certain tropes and archetypes that you go back to, and it's a matter of keeping it fresh and always, going back to character, remembering that there's a character behind everything that makes the story different, even if you're dealing with a homicide every week. But so to me as a writer, it never has gotten easier. It's always hard. It's always hard. I wish I could say, oh, I'm just gonna, sit down and this is gonna write itself practically, as the saying goes, but it's gonna just never flow like through that.
Me. It's just gonna come out. And
well, sometimes it flows and it's great, but it's always the process. It's always challenging.
Yeah. Well, I imagine also that you must get a lot of people, since you've been doing it for so long, you're higher up there, asking you to mentor them. And I heard from a little birdie your mentor process, and I think it's very. It's applicable. It's you can actually do it. And can you tell us a little bit about when people come to you?
Okay. This is interesting. Yeah, because you're talking about Shaz Bennett, who is an amazing. She's an amazing writer, director, and I know that. When Shaz was kind of making a transition, she was a film programmer for many years at AFI and Sundance. So she had a whole other career and life in film, and she wanted to get into television. And, we had just been friends, but I had no idea that she had such a passion for TV and really wanted to break in. And so when she asked me, and now I'm going to preface this by saying, this is Shaz's version. I think this is apocryphal because I may have said this to her, and I'm sure I probably did, like maybe off the cuff. But I have not ever said this to anybody else.
I want you to know before you say it. It's so good though.
Right. Well, okay. I'll tell you. So she said, I said to her that what she needed to do was just to start writing and to keep writing and to write 10 scripts and write 10 scripts and write 10 more. And then when she had one that she thought was really good, then that's the one that she should send out and get notes on. And that's what she did. She just kept writing and started writing. Now, I know that is a piece of advice that I had been given, that you needed to finish everything that you started to write and just keep writing to completion. so that you could look back at your work and self-critique your work and learn how to edit yourself. But also you get better when you do it. The only way to write is to keep writing. It's not something that you can read about. But so Shaz always tells that story that I told her to write 10 scripts. And when she'd done that, send me the best one. And she did.
It's so good though.
But what I have done, like I haven't with other writers, people will always, especially people starting out, and certainly this is what happened for me. I had a writer who's now a friend named Kevin Arkadai, who agreed to read something that I had written. I didn't know him, but he was like, I like to give back. So you're the person I'm going to read your script. And he gave me notes on my script. I did not agree with all of his notes, but that was irrelevant. He read my script and he gave me notes. So I did every note that he gave me. Mm-hmm. I executed every note that he gave me and then sent him the script back to say, oh, see here, this is what you suggested. And I did it. Thank you so much. And then shortly thereafter, he was running a show, got hired to run a show. And he hired me as a staff writer, he said, because he knew that I could execute his notes, because I had proven to him by doing his notes that I could execute notes. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I got, like one of my first staff writer jobs. So when writers come to me or ask me to read a script, and I think a lot of times young writers in particular don't realize how time intensive it is to read a script. It's not just, I'm not your mother. I'm not just going to read it for an hour and be like, oh, honey, that's so good. Because that's not helpful to you.
Yeah.
If you want notes from someone and you're asking for someone to read your script and give notes, that's a labor intensive process. That means I'm giving up part of my weekend to, do this for you. So if I agree to do that for someone, my deal is if I'm going to give you notes, then you have to execute those notes and get the script back to me in a timely fashion. You have to do some work too. I'm not just reading your script and telling you, oh, how great it is. Or I think a lot of people think, oh, she'll read this and hire me immediately or want to, help me get it made. And that's not usually the case. Usually, it's going to be a great sample for you or something that will help you down the road. But if you're going to ask me to do some work for you, I'm going to ask you to do some work for yourself, which is you have to do a rewrite, And usually that weeds out the people who actually want notes, or the people who are just looking for either a compliment or, just some validation, which is fair. Everybody, you want to know that your stuff is good. Everybody wants to hear praise, and that you definitely need that helps you get going. But if I'm going to read a script and give notes, then you got to do some work too.
Well, send it to your mom is what I'm hearing, right? So she can say,
exactly. Yes.
So she can say, oh, sweetie.
If you just want someone to tell you how great and wonderful your story is, then send it to your family.
Your family. Send it to your family. That's awesome. I just have a couple more questions for you. I'm just wondering, as a person of color, do you feel any responsibility to tell our story, to tell a good story? Do you?
Oh, yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. I mean, I will say that my writing career, and this is absolutely the truth. I don't think I've ever been hired for the first time on a show because of being just a good writer. I'm usually hired because I'm a woman and a person of color. I'm checking some box. And I fully know this, it used to happen a lot more this way for kind of the wrong reasons, which is, oh, we've got a Black character on this show, or we've got a female character. So we're looking for a woman. We're looking for a Black writer to address the concerns of this character that the largely all white writing staff feels they would not understand. Yeah. And so they were blatantly looking to fill that slot. And so, in a way, it felt like I'm only being hired because I'm a woman or a person of color. And I said that would happen for the first time I work with someone. The second time I work with someone, it's because they've worked with me and they know that I'm just good. that I'm a good writer, that I'm talented, and it has nothing to do with being a woman or being Black at that point. I feel like what's happening now, in the wake of so much, the social justice movements and people realizing that there are value in other stories, and the demand for stories about different types of people. Now people are kind of doing a similar thing, which is like, oh, we have to have Black writers and women writers. We have to have the diversity that we have lacked before. So they're still kind of looking for that, but it feels like the intention is a little bit more optimistic and hopeful. But to answer your question, when I am hired on a show, I feel an obligation to tell broader stories. I want to tell stories that are reflective of my community, but also underserved communities. There was a period in writing cop shows and procedurals where I felt like any show that I went on, if they were ever going to do a story about, say, the Asian community, I knew that at some point there was going to be a Chinese restaurant or a restaurant and some women in a container ship. Like that was how narrow the storytelling was. I knew that if we were going to do a story about the Latino community, it was going to involve boxing or baseball somehow. If we did a story about the Black community, it was going to be about gangs. Like these were just the tropes that minority communities got shoveled into within the cop world. And you got so used to it. And it was just like, how can we break out of this mold? How can we tell different stories? And I remember, I worked on one show where and I'll just come out and say it. When I worked on Law and Order, Eric Overmeyer hired me. And I know that Epatha Murkison is responsible for that because she had, it was the 16th season of that show. And I think she'd only seen 1 or 2 Black writers on it. And she was like, I want Black writers on the show. She used her power as an actress, as a lead on the show, to say you have to have Black writers. And Eric Overmeyer was totally down with that and reached out to me and hired me to work on the show. And my feeling was, I'm only writing stories about Black characters, because this was a show, Law and Order is a show about the criminal justice system in New York, where 85% of the prison population is Black, and yet it's less than 2% of the stories that were on Law and Order. It's like, this is not reflective of what's happening in this community. So I felt really strongly that every story that I did was going to be about Black people.
Yeah.
And that's what every story that I wrote, I was like, there are going to be Black characters in this. And I remember after casting one episode, I can't remember the director, but, and great directors, obviously fantastic crew on that show. But one of the directors, as we were putting the pictures of all of our cast on the floor next to each other, looking at them, he was like, wow, we sure do have a lot of Black characters in this episode. And I didn't say it at the time, and I wish I had, but I thought to myself, I wonder if you ever look at the photos and say, wow, we sure do have a lot of white actors in this episode. I'm sure that was never said, but it was striking to him because my intention was to stock every episode with nothing but Black people.
You got to take over.
Characters of color. Yeah, totally. Totally.
Yeah, I have to tell you that I was a little bit sad when I heard you were leaving Bosch for that little bit of time, because I remember reading Jerry's wife,
LaTanya.
LaTanya.
Yeah.
I remember reading it on the page and thinking, this doesn't feel forced. This feels like a conversation I've had at home, or I've heard at home. And so, there was no slang, or it just was like, it felt like, and so, Pierce too, like all of us, it just, and I don't know if you had a hand in that or making that up, but I remember the makeup of the writer's room, who was very amazing. And there wasn't a ton of diversity though. And so I was thinking, when you were leaving, I was like, where? But so
thanks for saying that. I mean, I loved writing for all the family characters. That was it's so great just because you get to see another side
Yeah.
of our detectives. But thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of detectives, as we get ready to land this plane,
Yeah.
there's this beautiful detective memoir called The Officer's Daughter. I mean, you wrote a book, and I'm gonna come clean, everybody. I thought this was all made up. I thought that,
Okay.
I didn't know it was your cousins, that it was a
Yeah.
real, like, it was like Burger King. I was like in it, and I was like, oh, wow. So you write real stuff too? I mean, sorry, that sounded bad.
No, I
real.
I know what you're saying, though. I mean, this was a labor of love. Here, I'm going to show you. This is my book, The Officer's Daughter.
Yes.
And it's my debut memoir. And when I was 16, my 16-year-old cousin Karen was killed in a robbery gunner riot at Burger King in the Bronx. Yeah. And my dad was a parole officer in Manhattan. Her father was a homicide detective in Manhattan. And it became a huge manhunt for the three boys who had killed her in this robbery. And it was kind of a loss of innocence for me growing up as a 16-year-old girl. And it also really affected my sense of the world and also my relationship with my dad. And what happened was, actually, I was writing on Bosh when all of this was kind of unfolding. My cousin reached out to me to write a letter to the parole board because one of the boys was coming up for parole, and my cousin, who's Karen's brother, wanted to write letters to say that he should be kept in prison. And I honestly was not so sure that that was the right thing anymore. And so it kind of sent me down this rabbit hole of getting the parole transcripts for the boys, the court transcripts, and asking a question about what is forgiveness? How do you forgive people? And it just took me on a journey of looking back at myself at 16 and also looking at myself now and, having the capacity to forgive not only strangers, but people within your own family for how they behave. Yeah. And so that was a memoir that I would write before I would go into work on Bosh, get up early in the morning at 4 or 5 in the morning and try and write for a couple of hours and then come in and get to work. But it was a real labor of love. Still, obviously, there's something that influenced me to become a cop show writer because of just having those people in my family and kind of understanding a lot of the contradictions in that world and particularly Black law enforcement, being Black and blue at the same time. Yeah. So.
And there was some stuff with your dad. You're like, and it was, I was reading too. I was really kind of just like, I know so much about her now. I got it on Audible, everybody. You can get it on Audible too.
Yeah, exactly. You can do it.
Yes, that's how I got it. Let me see that. Was that a thing too?
This is the CDs of it. Everyone asked me why I didn't read it. And I was like, because I'm not an actor. Like, no, let a professional do that, please.
I was expecting you. I'm just going to be honest.
Oh, God, no. I'm so glad.
No, so it's on Audible too, but it's out there. But, I was very interested in just like the relationship with your dad as a parole officer. And and talk about forgiveness. It sounded like there was a lot of that in there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's also, my dad had passed in 2005. So it's like looking at the personal relationships and how you forgive people for the worst moments of their lives and not defining people by the worst thing that they do, understanding that we could all use forgiveness and all want to be forgiven for the worst things that we've done. And how do you arrive at that place, really? Yeah.
The Officer's Daughter.
Yeah.
I just had to come clean. I've known you as, just writing fiction.
Right. Yes. Right. No, And so I just assumed this was another, but then we got into it and I was like,
Oh, so
Wait, what point did you realize it wasn't fiction, or was it after you listened to it and then you're like, wait a minute?
Right? No, well, no. As I got into it, and I read the book. I mean, I'm sorry, I read this the what do you call it? The bio on it, the
Right,
beginning,
yeah.
and I was like, oh, this isn't that. I thought this was just another part of it.
Right.
You know what I mean? But when we got into it, it just draws you in when you're listening to it. It just draws you in. So I just want to say, wow.
Thank you. Thank you so
for that.
much. I appreciate that.
And I'm going to link it to everybody listen to. We're going to link it to the podcast at the bottom of this under the notes. Please.
Oh, cool.
Definitely. But we're going to end this here. But this podcast is all about mindset tips. And
okay,
I think of you as a boss. I mean, well, you literally were, but a boss. Just like a boss. And I guess what I want to ask is, what mindset do you think that we as actors, we as people can walk away with a boss mentality like you have?
I think
it's a big question. It's a big question.
Yeah, it is a big question. And to me, I think it applies to actors as well. But as a writer, I really, really believe that what you get is process, that you have to enjoy the process and not worry so much about the end result. And maybe there's, particularly for actors who have to, you're auditioning all of the time, knowing that even when you're preparing for an audition, you're working on your craft. That is still part of your craft, and you're bringing your craft into the room. So as long as you're in process, you're getting mileage, you're improving, you're getting better, and you should be enjoying it, fulfilling yourself, knowing that even though you're just going to be reading sides with somebody, that you're getting to perform and put your craft and your art out there. Yeah. And I think that hopefully will make all of the hard work feel like it's worth it, and that it's building towards something. I also feel like, what I say to younger writers is don't get out of line. You are in line to do something, and it may not be happening now, but don't ever walk away from something and be like, well, that's it, I'm going to move back home. No, you're not. There's no plan B. As long as you're moving ahead with your plan A, just keep going. Don't let other people take your dream away from you, and don't take it away from yourself. Just keep going.
I want to be clear on my Think Bigger podcast that I'm stealing that Elle. I'm a little bit emotional about that last piece. Don't get out of line. Don't get out of line is
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I love that you do this. You're such a great spirit and an inspiration, and I just love your energy and your talent. You have it, and you are eminently watchable. So I'm so excited for you, what you're going to do next. But I also just love that you're doing this podcast. Thank you, DaJuan. It's so incredible.
Don't get out of line.